What has been the biggest change for you during the lockdown with the Icelandic government has implemented in regards to the space industry? Have they changed their support or acknowledgement for space companies in Iceland, or what's the situation there?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we're, as an organization, we're 1 year old, and I mean, there was a few months before that that we prepared, and the first year was spent on building up a network domestically. So one of the things that people might not realize is that Iceland does actually contribute quite a lot to space, but we do not have a national space plan or any sort of policy on trying to participate on our terms. And that's something that we're working on. And in 2016, Parliament passed a resolution to do such. So one of the challenges that we had is that you have an industry here that is often more networked internationally than domestically. So we've had to kind of build up that sense of sort of unified voice and community within the country, simply because the clients are abroad. So that was sort of what we did the first year. And I mean, obviously the reason why sort of certain sectors of the industry pushed for this to happen, for us to put this office together, is that they wanted to be able to communicate with the government, and that this resolution that Parliament passed about joining the European Space Agency. And up until COVID, I can say that we had a good relationship with the government, and they were, and we had a sort of ongoing conversation with them. But I think maybe people didn't understand the importance of our work and how much money and investment and opportunities we could bring to the country. So it did in 2019 feel a bit lonely at times, and you kind of, and we've often talked about it within the office that, well, like, there are times where you feel like a snake oil salesman because you're talking about this tiny country participating in space. But post COVID-19, there is simply put a reason to rethink our industry, and we need to focus more on innovation. And one of the points that we've always said to the government and domestically is that space is a cooperative industry. It's on the cusp of human knowledge. So by default, we need to work with other people. There's no single organization that has the resources and the knowledge to actually do this on their own. So it is just by default cooperative, which has been a fantastic experience to get into. And I mean, basically, what I can tell you is that there is a more interest, there's more positivity. Parliament just sort of urged the cabinet to get working on the application. We just started a research project with about 15, 20 researchers and 17 cooperative departments all over the world. And there's been this sort of surge of positivity, which is due to COVID, but it's also due to an unbelievable amount of work that we did in 2019. So 2020 was always supposed to be this sort of year of grand announcements, but I think COVID has pushed for that. And I'll finish now. But like, one significant factor is that Iceland has actually been very successful in containing COVID. So one of the things that we did immediately was to open a dialogue with our government on science field trips and launching capabilities, and to make sure that those interested in coming, because Iceland does welcome absolute heaps of space-related field trips every year to test rovers and train astronauts and so on. So we managed to kind of open a dialogue with the government that we would be able to seek exemptions for those groups, which had a huge implication, because obviously that is one of the questions that people are asking all over. And with the window to Mars closing for 26 months, this does strengthen our position. But so generally, things have been insane, but in a positive way. And I think the government is sort of noticing that we are, I mean, what we're working on is is an innovative and entrepreneurial industry that allows our startups to stand on the shoulders of giants from the very beginning. So why wouldn't we participate in that?
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much for that. And no, over to Melissa on this one. So you were speaking earlier about Cornwall Spaceport having a lot of key stakeholders and partners around the world. As the lockdown begins to ease, can you foresee any issues, or do you foresee any issues with different countries raising or releasing people at different times? So I think when we originally thought about this question, we were thinking more about the UK and the US for yourself, but now we can see even the UK itself, between Scotland, Ireland and Wales, there's differences with how the restrictions are being held. Do you foresee that having any issues for yourselves?
I think it's already kind of had issues going through, not necessarily issues, but differences even from the beginning of the lockdown, because in the States, a lot of the aerospace industry was deemed essential service. So Virgin Orbit from the get-go was an essential service there. So they've been continuing with their launch program in Mojave. And that's meant that we've had to definitely keep up, even though we've been under a different level of lockdown over here in the UK. And that's kind of meant that where we're probably going to see a bit of a delay is through the regulations and secondary legislation going through Parliament here. So there might be a slight delay in that of a few months because of obviously, Westminster focusing on other things, which they should be. And but yet in the States, the program is still ticking along. So we might potentially see a bit of a delay from the UK side in that respect. In regards to kind of more of the recent differences amongst, Wales and Scotland, obviously, we work with the UK Space Agency's launch program, which obviously includes Scotland, and maybe there will be some differences out of that, but we know that the UK is working hard to get that legislation through so that we can get launched in the UK. And I think it will be interesting also to see, because Cornwall, again, we've had quite low rates down here, and it being such a tourist-based economy and a hospitality-based economy, I think there's going to be quite a move to try and get something going soon down here. So the fact that we'll be able to still create some really much needed jobs, what we're starting to see now is if Cornwall potentially could come out of certain areas a bit sooner, if we can get back on to start looking at how do we get the infrastructure on the airport to get ready to launch for when hopefully Virgin's shifting to over here, is that we can then create some much needed, jobs down here in a sector other than tourism and hospitality. So again, it's kind of wait and see, but I think there will be some challenges, but also I think there'll probably be some opportunities for some of these more remote or rural areas as well. So I think, wait and see, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it, and our colleagues over in the States, and seeing how things are developing over there as well. But also, just final mention is the satellite market in general in the UK, but also in Europe. So as Europe comes out at different stages, we want to offer launch to Europe as well. If certain areas, satellite manufacturers will be able to develop quicker to get their payloads ready, then that might impact us as well. So it will be interesting to see.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So George, I'll come to you. So you're involved with numerous space activities around the globe, ranging from research, development, various space agencies and large system integrators, service providers, startups, and as well as investors. What observations have you seen during the last sort of 3 months? Has there been a decrease in investment, an increase in investment? Or?
Good question. So first of all, actually, I was in Singapore and Malaysia when it started, all the way till mid-February or something. And and that was a gathering, several meetings where also Americans and Europeans were there, etc., etc. So people from all over the world. So, and even there, I saw a kind of very different reaction. Some people just, every morning, people left the show or kind of went home because being very afraid what's going to happen. So that was one thing. So it was very interesting to see, also being in Southeast Asia, which was not there where the hub of the breakout was, First of all, the observation, how did people deal with it, all the way from heads of agencies to research engineers, right? So there was quite a diverse reaction to the outbreak of the pandemic. Then we saw in exchange with numerous organizations, as you just mentioned, we saw a lot of different reactions, and it really took a while for people and organizations to realize what was happening, to realize the situation, and the same apparently with the politicians, right? So that is probably a good mirror, you know, to see how it's going to go. So that was the same in things. But let me share with you a couple of examples. So we have a good relationships, for instance, with the German Aerospace Center, DLR. And there's a couple of activities we've been discussing. And from the very beginning, all of a sudden, everybody was sent home to work from home. And as far as I can tell, and what we learned and heard is that worked very well. And without a big switch, you know, so kind of like they adapted to the situation rather quickly, or maybe they've been well prepared for that. So that sort of works fairly well. Another example, talking, for instance, some sites of Airbus, kind of large sites with a lot of people working as normal, but in shifts with separated workspace. Interesting thing to see. And then, so we were also involved in workshops with Confers, you know, the industry consortium for surfacing things, and with the European Commission Peraspera program. So there were some joint global workshops with people from all over the world. And so everything was moved to digital and to remote. And that worked very, very well. But an interesting observation that is more like with regards to how do we do business. I personally detect and see a trend towards visualization. So we are moving partly away from documents, you know, kind of documents to kind of visualize stuff. We share the screen and somebody points you from A to B through schematics or kind of graphs. That's quite interesting. So I've always personally been a lover of that and very much in favor of this. And I feel confirmed that is really very beneficial, and it helps shorten conferences. You know, you have to do your homework, you bring people to the point, you show here ABC, and that's the way it works. The challenges we are facing, and that is not really yet managed very well, is to really get organized with the different time zones and the different conference systems. I think I have here on my various screens, I think I have about 20 of them. Some of them I've never heard before, you know, so we're using them. And it takes some time to get used to these things. What I personally believe, so the message here is there is the trend, the trend towards the digitalization is full speed. And a last comment on this is maybe a human thing. I know and I see that people very much appreciate being in these meetings with a shirt and underwear or bathing suit, right? So, and that apparently, and we see this all the time when somebody gets a coffee or something. That's kind of funny, you know? So I think there is a sort of a relaxed mode as part of the game, but the processes certainly still need to be adopted. And in some organizations, it works very, very well, I have to say.
Thank you very much for that. Christina, I'll come over to yourself in this one. So what difficulties have you seen with the university due to the pandemic? Has it impacted on the research activities, or what about students, overseas students, things like this? Have they had to go home?
Yep, it's a very good question. So once the lockdown happened, the university had a big task of moving a very large chunk, if not all of our delivery online. So that was a very big change for our colleagues, who had to basically try to deliver things online as best they could, still mark papers. In terms of student experience, we have a very large proportion of our students who are international students, and they had a difficult decision to make about where they want to spend their time, because you kind of start to realize that you're gonna get stuck in a country. So it's choosing of where you're going to be, and some of them were like in student accommodation, for example. So it was a big change for the students and the staff, and especially when the schools shut down, a lot of people who were doing teaching kind of during the day had to be more flexible how they're delivering their work. We've actually taken that as an opportunity, I suppose, as best as you can, and a lot of the university research has got diverted towards COVID-19 activities, which has been really good. for us here in Space and Satellites work and the innovation program, we released a podcast series called Edinburgh Space Data Capital, and actually have had amazing engagement as part of that podcast. So we've had it in the pipeline for a long time and just didn't have a chance to release it. And then I think the week after lockdown, we're like, wait a minute, this is a good time. People are probably going to be listening to podcasts. So that's been highly successful for us. I've been one of my hats is being an innovation advisor for the Sprint program, and we've been trying to ensure that the projects that we currently have with the small medium enterprises working in space and satellites can carry on remotely. So a lot of the work we've been doing with my colleagues in industry and researchers is trying to enable existing projects to still go ahead online to the best of our ability, and then kind of contingency plan for anything that can't physically happen. So we do rely a lot on lab space and clean rooms for various bits and pieces. So we've had to adjust and change things. But it's actually, it's been mostly very, well, I mean, I've been very busy. It hasn't stopped as a result of the pandemic. It's just changed, which is interesting. And I think it might change for the longer term in that way, and then allow for different kind of engagement. And actually, there's been so many different events like this one today and a number of other ones that happened, and it's been a very good educational experience, a good chance to reach a very wide audience. So people are logging in, like yourself, you're obviously in different time zones where you're logging in and you're engaging people differently, which has been good. It's been facilitating conversations that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. So yeah, it's been a mixed bag, and I think next semester is going to be very telling, because we are still the University of Edinburgh is still open. It's planning to be open as normal from semester one, but it's going to be heavily delivered online as much as possible, and we're just going to have to wait and see, really.
Thank you very much.
If I may, you asked me also about and I realized I didn't really answer to that, about investment. So I think there's two things. There is a number of companies and even some closings which take place in terms of investment, even during these top 3 months. So on the one hand side, it's moving ahead, but there's also quite a number of particular startups where investment is sort of hanging, the process is stopped, and so they're facing hard times. And that even involves 2 of the startups I'm personally invested in. So where it's just getting difficult, it's not a catastrophe, but it's just like a lengthy process. And what is interesting, you may be aware of the survey being launched by NSR, Northern Sky Research. So they made a survey on the COVID-19 impact, and so that was broken down into the various players, including investors too. And to the most part, those investors didn't see any trouble during the current situation. So it's got ongoing deal flow, making investments, etc., etc. So it really depends. We need to have a closer look at these stats and facts and figures. But as of today, I think investment is still working. But you all may be aware of the insolvency of OneWeb. And there is quite a number of companies underneath in the supply chain, and so we will see what that means, and I think it will take a while to really see the impact on that. So in summary, investment, it goes in 2 tracks. Part of the investment just stops, and other investments keeps going, and that is what we keep hearing from the industry.
Okay, thank you for that. And Robin, for the last question then in the personalised section. So Skyrora is pre-revenue, so we're R&D focused at the moment. What difficulties has COVID-19 caused that you've seen, and has there been any surprising outcomes?
Well, fortunately, we've been able to distance a lot. We've been able to do a lot of work from home locations because of the kind of documentation and logistical preparation that we need to do for our following stages. The most surprising thing for me, really, is the progress that we've been able to make with producing PPE. It's something that we wanted to do to contribute to solving the problem of shortages, but the team that actually took that on have done a tremendous job, and we've now got something which is actually CE marked, not just a stopgap. So it struck me, actually, one of our taglines is dedicated, responsive, versatile, which is what we want to provide for the launch of satellites in the future. but this is perhaps the first instance where we have really lived up to that before we get to the stage of providing the service we actually set out to do. It's been really impressive. It's some of the younger staff members which have been pursuing that whilst we've been trying to get all the logistics and as much as possible stacked up, ready for the main program. Once we can go again, once we can get out and do stuff, they've done a tremendous job getting that together, and that's been one of the most encouraging parts of the whole experience.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Robin.